Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, August 4th. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing, making beer at home. But today, we deviate a little bit from our mission, but not much. This Saturday, August 6th, is Mead Day, a national event sponsored by the American Brewers Association. In a little bit, my friend Steve Wilkes joins me on the porch to sample some homemade mead and to talk about how best to enjoy it. But first, to give us a bit more information on Mead Day and mead in general, we're pleased to have a very special guest, Paul Gatza, Director of the Brewers Association and the American Homebrewers Association, who joins us by phone. Welcome, Paul. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Let's start with a basic question. What is mead?
Mead is fermented honey, so it's an alcoholic beverage based on honey, whereas you'd find beer being based on grains, wine being based on fruit, particularly grapes. Sake would be rice. Well, mead is fermented honey.
And mead's been with us a while, hasn't it?
Mead is probably the oldest fermented beverage because there is a belief among some that it exists in nature, that if you have a tree that would be struck by lightning, say, and the top of it gets knocked off and bees form a hive in there, and the airborne yeast reacts with the rainwater and the honey from the bees, you would get this soupy, syrupy mixture 10,000 years ago when food was really an issue. You're stumbling through the hunting and gathering, and you find this mead tree, and you scoop it up, and you get yourself fat and happy, which were very good things to have back then.
This is kind of a gift from the gods, then.
To some degree. There is some belief that the mead tree wouldn't exist in nature, but for the sake of romance, and I can picture it happening, and, I watch Winnie the Pooh with my daughter, and there certainly is a lot of honey growing in trees in that show, so there we go.
So are you insinuating that Winnie had alternate purposes for gathering the honey in the tree?
Oh, maybe not.
Maybe he's not a bear of as little a brain as we think he is.
That's right.
Now, you mentioned the word romance. There is, as I understand it, a historical connection between mead and the honeymoon.
That's right. There is a tradition that newly married couples thousands of years ago would be sent off with a month's worth of mead, basically to go from moon to moon in hopes of fathering a male heir. And modern science has actually found that there may be something to that, in that mead would lower the pH, which would have has shown to have a greater chance of the male sperm being, or the sperm with the male chromosome being a little more functional in the acidic environments that mead would create. So there may be something to mead being used to create a male heir, but it goes back thousands of years, and honeymoon, word honey from mead and moon being a month, is where that comes from.
So people have been referring to mead all this time without really even knowing it.
That's correct.
Now, you want to kind of change the people's perceptions of mead, or at least raise the awareness with Mead Day. Tell us about Mead Day and how can we observe Mead Day?
Mead Day is something we created just to have a midsummer event and also to tip our hat toward mead. While the American Homebrewers Association is primarily oriented around beer making, mead goes back to the first issues of Zymergy magazine when we formed as a company back in 1978. And so this is just a way to, acknowledge it. Now, Mead Day, some people make mead on Mead Day, some people drink mead on Mead Day, some people just think about mead on Mead Day, but I like to do all of those.
And on the website, on beertown.org, there is an official Mead Day recipe from Steve Schmidt of Anchorage, Alaska, who apparently won Best of Show, or he's the Best of Show mead maker at the 2005 Meadlinium 8 competition. And his recipe is called Morning Wood Oak-Aged Mead. And he uses orange blossom honey, and he uses oak chips to flavor. Now, do you have to use orange blossom honey in making mead, or can you just use any honey?
You can use most any honey. What you don't want to get are the pasteurized honeys, because there's a whole lot less flavor with those, and they don't necessarily ferment as well as the raw honeys. In general, orange blossom would be used by a lot of mead makers because it tends to be a lighter, delicate honey with a nice floral nose to the meads that are made with the orange blossom honey. But, other good ones would be tupelo honey, clover honey. There's all sorts of varieties. You can blend honeys to get different flavors. So there's really a whole area of experimentation regarding honey.
And you can also, like I said, in this recipe, he uses oak chips to flavor the mead, and I guess make it taste like it's been aged in an oak barrel. And I've done that myself. But I've also made mead just with no flavoring. But I also understand that you can make terrific meads with fruits as well. Yep.
Mead with fruit is generally called melomel, and my personal favorites would be boysenberry and red raspberries. These two go really well. They have a little bit of a tannic quality, which goes well with the sweetness of the honey, and that usually turns the mead that you're making into a beautiful ruby-colored beverage that's beautiful to look at and excellent to drink.
Now, hopefully our audience is homebrewers, so they're going to be curious if they haven't made mead before. But what's the basic procedure in making mead? Is there a boil like in making beer?
Each mead maker does it a different way. Some mead makers will boil the honey like making beer. Some mead makers will just heat the honey to between 150 and 170 degrees for about 20 minutes to pasteurize the honey, with the theory that if you boil it, you might scrub off some of the aromas in the boiling process. And then other mead makers will come from the winemaking point of view, where they will add sulfites and not use any heat at all. I personally will either boil my honey or pasteurize my honey.
Yeah, in my experience, and maybe I've just been lucky, but I haven't boiled in the past. I've just added pure spring water to 10 or 12 pounds of honey, and then added some. Do you have to add yeast nutrients as well to kind of help the yeast get a kick?
Right. Whereas in beer making, the barley has the nutrients to get it going. Honey does not have those nutrients. So the risks of not using a nutrient would be a stuck fermentation or the very high finishing gravity. And so I usually like to add a little bit of dry malt extract to provide those nutrients. Some people will use a yeast nutrient product labeled as such, like a diammonium phosphate. But I personally just like to use a little bit of powdered malt extract to help kick it off.
And what kinds of yeasts, what strains of yeast can you use for mead making?
A lot of wine yeasts will do well. I've tasted meads made with beer yeast as well, but I think the wine yeast will tend to handle the higher alcohol content that most meads are made towards. When I make a really strong mead, I tend to use a mixture of a wine yeast, like a red wine yeast, and a sherry yeast. I kind of like a little bit of that musty, sort of sherry oxidized kind of flavor to add some complexity to it.
And what's the fermentation time?
Meads will generally go through a primary fermentation in about 2 weeks to about 2 months. Then secondary fermentation can be rather quick. You can usually just let it clear in a secondary fermenter, or sometimes it can take months and months. So with mead, I think the overriding principle is make a lot of it at different times, and then that way you always have some in the pipeline, and you never have to rush your mead out.
Yeah, you definitely want to have patience in making mead.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of meads are really good pretty soon, after 2-3 months. But generally, if they're really good after 2 or 3 months, after about a year, they might be really great.
Now, there is you can add clarifying agents at the time of bottling, or you can prime it like a beer, and if you clarify it, you'll have a still mead with no carbonation, and if you prime it, you'll have a sparkling mead, right?
Yeah, if you prime it, you should be able to trap that in the bottle and it would be sparkling. I've made mead that's like a dry champagne before, where I primed it for the bottles. In general, I tend to make more of the still meads. I let them settle out on their own, and my usages for them tend to be toward the medium sweet to sweeter variety, and I usually leave them still. But it's place for experimentation, and whatever you like, you can make it.
In my experience in making meads, I have always primed it, and over time you get something that looks and tastes a lot like champagne.
Yeah.
And if you serve it in a champagne flute, you get the nice bubbles on the side, and you get the nice little head on the top. And especially if you can wait a year or two or even longer, it gets drier and crisper and more mature, and it's definitely worth the wait, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I like to age my meads for a couple of years.
And what are the things that you have to look for in making mead? What are the things that the stumbling blocks, or if you've never made a mead before, what advice can you give people?
Be careful who you give samples to, because they may end up really liking it and then coming over to your house a whole lot and emptying your mead supply. So that would be one thing to watch out for. Another would be in the brewing process, the stuck fermentation is always something to be considered about. So you definitely want to use your hydrometer and keep an eye on the gravity, and do some reading where you based on your recipe of where that gravity should end up. You can always try to get it going again if it does get stuck, but that's probably the biggest issue people have. And with regards to fruit, one tip I would have is that freezing fruit will often break the cell walls, which will then get more fruit flavor, so more bang for your buck, because fruit can be expensive.
Good advice. Now, one last point. Mead is generally fairly high in alcohol, and it goes down pretty easy, so it can catch up to you pretty quickly, right? It
can. There is a range of meads being made commercially now that are around 7% alcohol. But then you'll find meads that go up to around 18% alcohol. So there is a range there, and I do recommend knowing what you're drinking. And with mead, be in an environment that will not require driving afterwards.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Paul, and Paul Gatza, director of the American Homebrewers Association. I hope you have a happy mead day.
All right. Thanks, James. You too.
And if you want more information about the American Homebrewers Association's observation of Mead Day, you can go to our website, basicbrewingradio.com. That's basicbrewingradio.com. And on that page, in the summary of this episode, you'll see links to both the American Homebrewers Association page on Mead Day and to the official Mead Day recipe. And if you hear traffic in the background and some birds chirping, it's because we're out on the porch. I'm out on the porch with my friend Steve Wilkes. Thanks for joining me here today, Steve.
Thanks, James.
And Steve joined me on our home brewing DVD. So, but this is your first introduction to the podcast.
It is.
And I apologize for waiting so long to have you on.
Well, that's not a problem at all. I've enjoyed the first few editions or episodes.
And boy, can you picture a better late July day in Northwest Arkansas?
This is wonderful. I mean, this is great. 2 days ago yesterday it was about 100 degrees, and today it's 65 out here, 70 degrees.
We've had some rain this morning, so.
And we've got a couple of great meads to sample today.
That's right. Well, we hope they're great. I made them. So if they're bad, it's my fault.
Oh, I'm sure they're going to be wonderful.
We've got one mead that I made this past year, and another mead that I made I think I looked it up. I bottled it in May of 1999. I called it my Y2K mead.
So we're going to party like it's 1999. I couldn't resist that joke. Stale though it is.
Well, we'll see if the mead is stale. What I wanted to do is taste these meads and talk a little bit about how they were made, and then you've got some background in the culinary arts, and I want to call upon your knowledge of food to talk about how we may enjoy these other than just drinking them by themselves on the porch, which is a pretty good way to
Not
enjoy
a bad
it.
way to enjoy them.
Yeah, if you're,
themselves. Shall I do the honors?
Please.
All right.
And we're going to start with the 04.
It's made in 2004.
That's right. And this is a mead. It's got some carbonation. That's good. And we're using champagne flutes, crystal champagne flutes.
Mm-hmm.
And you can drink them out of anything, really. But the champagne flute, since this, it was primed just like a beer with 3/4 cups of corn sugar into 5 gallons of mead before bottling. But the champagne flute really accentuates the bubbles because the bubbles stick to the vertical surface of the champagne flute, and they are. That's a lot of activity in there, huh, Steve?
A bunch. Boy, it really does. It looks like it's a white champagne. If you look at it, someone would think you're drinking champagne. To you.
Cheers.
Very good.
It's very dry.
It's very dry.
And there's a bit of fruitiness, not as much as in a champagne, probably. What do you think?
I think it's wonderful. And, yeah, it's got a little sweetness right at the end. When it hits your mouth, it almost explodes. And
is that the carbonation, you think?
Yeah, it's carbonation. And then there's a little bit of residual sweetness, but not sweet like a spumante kind of thing. Nothing like that. This is much superior.
It's not a grape sweetness.
No, not at all.
And all this is I'll give you my recipe for this mead.
Okay.
I got 12 pounds of honey from the local Viney Grove, Arkansas farmer that we know who has bees. And just said, give me some honey. So I got 12 pounds of that, and it's a pretty clear honey this year.
Yeah.
And so it's not a varietal. He doesn't have a specific crop that's near his house that, you can say this is a peach.
It's just got wildflowers and clover and whatever.
Whatever's around his farm.
Yeah.
But it was a darn good batch of honey this year. So we have 12 pounds of honey, 5 gallons of Mountain Valley spring water from Hot Springs, Arkansas, and some yeast nutrient, and an acid blend, which kind of will counteract a bit of the sweetness a little bit.
Yeah.
And just a wine yeast, and that's it.
Well, that's enough. That's really good.
Now, should we taste the second one before we talk about what goes with?
Let's do a little contrast and compare.
While you're doing that, I'm gonna try this some more. That's a good sound after 6 years.
Yeah.
I did say 6 years, right?
You did.
Now this was made from a kit, and the honey was a bit darker, so this is more of it's almost the color of a Pilsner.
It is. Or I was going to say it looks like a Rhine wine, like a Riesling from Germany. It's beautiful.
It also has quite a bit of carbonation. Now this, I did use the oak chip flavoring in that I boiled a cup or two of water with oak chips in it, and I poured that into the mead as it went into the primary fermentation. So it would be interesting to see if we taste that.
You do. I taste more honey with this.
That's quite a different.
It's very different. It's not as crisp as the first one to me.
No.
It's richer.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It has a heavier, richer flavor to me.
It is. It's much sweeter than I expected.
It's quite, but it's still not sweet. When you buy a commercial mead, and I don't want to talk about everybody's commercial mead, but the commercial still meads that you tend to run across tend to be really sweet, like drinking like a glass of port. They're really, really sweet. Even though we're saying that the Y2K mead is sweeter, that's really a small scale that we're on, because it's still quite dry.
It's a relative term.
Oh yeah, it's very relative.
I'll agree. It is quite dry, but in contrast to the first one, it's quite a bit sweeter.
Yeah,
and a bit heavier.
Yes, it's heavier. In some ways, you'd almost say that the first one would be like a really light American standard if it were a beer, and this would be like a really, really rich Helles or something. With a bunch of malt in it. So
it's interesting because in the first one that we tasted, I put 12 pounds of honey. In the second one, there's, I believe, 10.
I'll be darned.
So less honey going into it, but yet just because of and it wasn't a varietal either. It was just honey. Kind of a bulk honey that I guess came in the kit.
Man, boy, they're both really good.
So what would go with this, Steve? If we were planning a special dinner with the mead, what would we eat?
If I were to serve these two meads, and they're different enough, you could serve them at two different times in a meal. I'd start in just the order that we did. I'd start with this lighter one, and I'd serve it very much like I would an extra dry or a brut champagne. So if you think about what would go with an extra dry or brut champagne, this would go very nicely. So caviar, salmon. Salmon just seems wonderful with either one of these, a smoked salmon or something like that. Cheeses, fruits. I probably wouldn't put a lot of citrus fruits with either one of these.
That'd be overpowering.
Somehow it doesn't work inside my mouth. But boy, I can really taste. I can with this first one. I just think it would go so well with any kind of seafood that you would want to put together, or with a white cheese like bries and camemberts and those kinds of things. This, to me, I probably wouldn't serve it with like blue cheeses, like really heavily veined cheeses, or with really rich yellow cheeses. But the lighter, whiter cheeses, and even if they're kind of stinky white cheeses, I think they go really well with it. The second one, the Y2K, would work equally well, but it's heavier and it's richer, and so it'll take heavier and richer foods. I think it might be easier to say what wouldn't go with it, and I think what wouldn't go with either one of these would be a big piece of red meat, steak, barbecue.
That was
things
going to
like
be my question.
Neither one of these work that well with meat. Now don't get me wrong. I think if you like it, you should eat it and you should drink it. I think people that tell you that you must serve white wine with fish, they need to go somewhere. But if you like it, you should have it. I'm just telling you what I would pair with it. If I was going to smoke a rack of ribs or a brisket, I wouldn't serve mead with it.
You'd have a good beer.
I have a good beer.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have, these would both go very well with pork or with poultry. So lighter proteins, lighter meats. These would go great with either one of these. Would go with a light pasta very nicely.
And you can really smell the oak. I think when you in the nose of it, you can really. It's even almost a little overpowering. And in fact, I think in my opinion, I think in the future, I don't know that I would use the oak chips. Having tasted the mead without the oak chips, and then having tasted the mead with, I think that I'd prefer just the clean, unadulterated honey taste.
I do too. Except, check this out.
With
the Y2K,
lay it on me, man.
Lay it on me, man. This has such a wonderful honey, and that oak kind of gives it not a smokiness, but you get about 1.5 inch thick pork chop, a really, really nice pork chop, and you crust that thing up with some crushed like macadamia nuts or almonds, or you could use walnuts, but they kind of burn pretty easy. But make like a coarse flour out of it. Not very fine. Just crush them. Crush them with a rolling pin or something, and then spice that up with a little salt, a little pepper, whatever else you might like. Maybe some thyme, maybe some dried thyme, and coat it like you were gonna make fried chicken. Deep fry it, but you're not gonna deep fry it. And then just saute that really lightly in a little butter, just for a couple of minutes to crust it up on each side, and then put it in the oven, finish it off for about 15 minutes. Serve that with the Y2K. On the side, have a little some mushrooms and spinach with a little cream. Saute the mushrooms, get a little color on them, a little salt, a little pepper, maybe a little garlic, maybe not, depends on if you like it. And then add in a generous helping of fresh baby spinach. Let that wilt just for a minute. 3 or 4 tablespoons of cream, let that heat through, serve that on the side. Killer. I mean, that would be excellent with this. That would just be dynamite. With the first one, I keep going back to the salmon. Either grill or poach. I actually think poaching, because this is such a light flavor. You could take a nice a nice little salmon fillet, 4 or 5 ounces, steam it or poach it, but a really light cooking method. Make a little court bouillon in the bottom, some onion and some lemon and whatever you want to kind of flavor it with. Let that steam kind of come up and caress that salmon fillet for a minute or two. About 8 minutes. That's about how long it takes, 7 or 8 minutes. Then let that cool. Then serve that with a little yogurt and dill sauce on top of it. And for a side, I'd probably go this time of year. I'd probably get some really, really good homegrown tomatoes or from the farmer's market. Slice those up. Just drizzle a little olive oil on them. Cut a little fresh basil out of the garden. Break up some mozzarella on the top of that. Maybe a little lemon juice. Maybe the tomatoes don't need it if they're acidic. A little salt. That's it. That's dinner. Serve that with this 04 mead, and you're in heaven.
Wow. So these are not hard and fast rules like you said.
No.
And the thing that I've encountered is that, and you've made meads in the past as well.
Yes.
Every batch can be different depending on what honey you use. May depend on what temperature you ferment at, what time of year it is.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many variables.
But isn't it the beauty of it? Isn't it the beauty of home brew and of home mead making? Because unlike opening up a Budweiser or opening up even a whatever it might be, you know what it's going to taste like. Now that has its own appeal.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But there's just such a magic in opening up, this mead or this beer or whatever it is that you made yourself, and that you taste it and you go, oh man, this would be so great with some salmon or with some pork, whatever. And then you have a dinner party and you have your friends over and it's all about enjoying life and enjoying your friends and your family and the great weather and just this universe that we live in. That's what it's all about. And honey and water and yeast together for a few months. Does it get any better than that?
It's magic.
It's magic.
Well, there you go. I don't know what else we can say.
There's not a whole lot more to say about it. You could kind of pontificate on for a long time.
And the more mead you drink, the longer
it goes.
You pontificate.
That's right.
Which maybe we should cut off right now. Because,
I think it's time to stop.
I think we should drink some more mead.
Yeah.
Off the air, not really on the air, but off the recording, and we'll go from there. But thank you, Steve Wilkes.
Thank you, James.
My partner, my friend. I appreciate your being here.
I appreciate being here.
From all of us here at Basic Brewing Radio, we hope you have a happy mead day. And don't forget, if you want to drop us a line, we'd be happy to hear from you. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say hey, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. On the next episode, Paul Gatza joins us again to talk about home brewing in the United States and about the American Home Brewers Association. We hope you can be with us. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. We'll talk to you next time. So long.